Our fears are transformed through eye contact. Be brave and share the room with them.
That is...
Let me say it again.
Okay.
Our fears are transformed through eye contact. Be brave and share the room with them. It's a haiku in a very loose sense, because be brave and isn't usually a way that you would end a line.
It's true.
But for the purpose of Solacene, where we're not usually the strictest
of individuals.
Yeah.
That poem low-key leaves me speechless because it encapsulates this conversation that we're about to have so well.
Thank you.
Because this week, it's our first episode after our education series, and we thought, why not just tackle a big old topic of people in public?
Yeah, I think it's kind of an amorphous subject, whereas all the ones we've tackled so far in this podcast have been very
discreet,
very easily discreet and easily described and outlined even through the title. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think we decided the title for this one is just called "Put Your Phone Down," maybe with a little exclamation point for some character. Obviously, the listeners will know.
Yes.
We'll see what fits the Solacene brand. Mm-hmm. But hopefully during the episode, we kind of do well to really nail down exactly what we're talking about, because it could be viewed, I guess, as a symptom of like a bunch of other stuff, like technology or the internet or built infrastructure or, mental health or education indeed. But I do think that if we were to try and summarize what we're talking about in one thesis, it would be that we are right now trying to design the Solacene waiting room or elevator.
Yeah.
So I go to the elevator a lot in my notes.
It's true. There'll be a lot of menial spaces. You can't avoid them. There will be hallways. There will be waiting. There will be time spent in limbo.
Buses.
But in the Solacene, what will be different from now? Because it's not an insubstantial amount of time that we spend in these spaces.
Yeah.
Perhaps you spend 1 minute a day in the elevator, 7 minutes in a week. Thousands of minutes in your life.
Yeah.
And so...
Well, the bus is a good example because you spend a lot of time on the bus.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think in the poem I was trying to touch on this widespread, low-level social anxiety, which I think almost everyone our age and below and even above our age has now. Mm-hmm. Which really, there is this individual procedure or advice, which is always to be brave and face your fear, which I think in the modern age can be best summarized as the stranger in real life, not online.
So what I started with in thinking about the public situations is trying to define awkwardness for myself.
Yeah.
And obviously my first thought for defining awkwardness was trying to be optimistic, was the fact that it's me being uncomfortable being myself. So it's like, if I was 100% confident in myself, I'd never feel awkward. However, I have amended my definition to include the fact that you could be 100% confident in yourself and still be awkward, because it's how you make other people feel. So in the Solacene, I think we will need to, as a society, come together and agree that people will be different from one another. Whereas today, when we are in a setting where there's a bunch of individuals in a space, there's no expectation for them to talk to each other, they're just waiting for something to happen, like before a movie. And I don't think you necessarily have to talk to each other, but I do think you have to be okay with someone staring really intently at the screen in expectation, someone talking to the person they're with, someone twiddling their thumbs or pulling out their knitting. You have to be okay with yourself, but also just okay with the fact that other people are going to be different from you, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
So that would be in an unawkward, for a situation to be unawkward, you have to be okay with yourself and okay with other people being themselves, and then it will be unawkward. You can't just have one or the other. Because I'm like, I don't care what people are doing. I care what I'm doing. I feel like everyone has some combo of those things.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we got a little bit ahead of... Let me just try and wrap my head around what you're saying.
Okay.
So we're designing the Solacene waiting room and how the people are acting in it. Mm-hmm. You're saying you have to be comfortable in your own skin.
Yes. And comfortable with other people being comfortable in their own skin. Because I was reflecting on an example that you conveyed to me about someone dancing.
Yes.
And so you're at this event and someone's just dancing to the waiting music.
Right.
And it'd be very easy to be like uncomfortable with them dancing.
Okay.
I feel like with you and I, we love people being quirky.
It's true.
So we're like, that's awesome. I wish I was dancing kind of thing. Or maybe I don't wish I was dancing, but good for them.
Right.
But a lot of people would be like, even if they were like, I'm just vibing, waiting for this event to start. Oh, what are they doing? Why are they dancing? And it would make them uncomfortable.
So cringy. I can't be around you.
Yeah, but in the
secondhand embarrassment.
Secondhand embarrassment is extinct.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
That's a good way of starting, trying to define awkwardness.
Thank you.
I kind of did the same. My question was just, why does this happen? And this, hopefully by now people get a sense of what it is. What is this?
This is people being on their phone before the movie starts, being on their phone in the elevator.
Well, let me, I didn't want this to just be a, like, we hate phones. Here's the solution. Don't bring your phone thing. Because what really inspired this was that I went to a graduation convocation ceremony, which for universities, it was all the fixins, as they say, for Christmas dinner, all the gravy. There was a brass quintet. There was the university chancellor giving a speech.
People wearing robes.
People wearing robes, those kind of clownish, academic, but also cool, traditional, but also kind of silly outfits all over the stage. 1,000 people capacity, valedictorian, graduates all coming in, best day of their life, parents all excited, everyone's wearing suit, all that kind of thing. And it was genuinely surprising to me, even though I like to think I'm pretty critical of these things already, how many people were not paying attention. Disengaged from the speeches, like the big speeches. I understand when things get really boring, when it's just reading the names out, but it's like, this is the valedictorian speech. Or this was not just all the parents, it was the graduates.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, who were just on their phone is what I mean. And I was thinking, what could be more important? What could be more important? And I understand if people are taking photos. This isn't even that. Like, I didn't even want this episode to be about people taking pictures incessantly in public areas and living just to share things on Instagram. It's not even
go
that.
There. It's like a different
that's a whole
can
other
of
thing.
worms. Yeah.
I'm talking about the compulsion people have to almost disengage from events that might seem too important. This is too big. This is when you have to be present. But everyone's like texting someone random, or I saw people playing phone games during speeches, or like on Reddit or on social media. And it's like, that's not what you should be doing. That's not important. So I thought we could discuss why do people do that?
Yeah. I was thinking in those situations in particular, because I also considered church, how many times I went to church and just expected to be bored out of my mind, expected for nothing important to be said, basically. And I think that's just it. It's like, you're going to go to this speech and you're like, I don't really feel like I have the energy to learn something today. I don't have the energy to process, to really chew on what this person's about to say. So I'm just going to disengage and go on my phone. And so I feel like it's a fear of boredom or a fear of like being made to feel incompetent.
Well, I think there's a lot. I listed a few emotions and situations that are just genuinely unpleasant. Boredom being top of the list. Also sadness, awkwardness, as you already said, conflict, fear of rejection or any kind of failure like that, public humiliation, frustration, sadness, all those types of things. And almost all of these is like, no one really wants to willingly do this. No one really wants to willingly be bored in a waiting room, or willingly wants to be in conflict with somebody. But they're almost all ways character building things, right? Like, you never, after going on your phone, come away from it as a better, stronger, more developed or more learned person for the most part. Yeah,
I agree with that. And going back to the church example of this, it's like, you're going to go sit through a church service, or I feel like church is just like a kind of good example for me. And it's like, I do not want to hear the same person who I've heard for 20 years of my life share a message again. However, something you have instructed me as a human to do is, you can always learn something from someone, even if it's like going to be even if it's a negative that you take out of it. So, for example, with the convocation speeches, you might just be a parent there uninterested in medicine.
Yes.
However, you could learn a question you want to ask. You could learn something that you dislike. Like, you can just you can learn something.
That's what I think. I always I mean, I don't want to say I'm a paragon for paying attention, because I'm really not. I'm quite the daydreamer if I'm not on my phone. But what I like to think is that even if it's a boring speech or they're not saying anything remotely insightful about medicine, sometimes I like to consider the speech as in, why is this speech so boring? Why is the speech so bad? You know, what is it about them that doesn't show any charisma or any great storytelling? You know, why is this going nowhere? And just about the whole ceremony in general, how can this be designed better, I guess? I don't know if that's the most beneficial mindset to have.
Yes.
But I do like to think that. And even if it's not focusing on the speech, I have a certain nosiness where I'll be focusing on the other people. And I like to, as eventually this episode was born out of, I like to consider how people are reacting to the speech.
Yeah, and then even it's a joint experience, so you don't know anyone there. It's like the previews of a movie. But then afterwards, maybe you bump into a person and you discuss the previews, or you discuss something funny that happened in the theater. But if everyone was looking down at their phone, nothing funny is going to happen. Nothing interesting will happen. And even if it did, no one would notice it.
Yeah.
So I think it's just this sense of community that's completely lost when people are disengaged with the moment. Even if it's because we expect nothing to come out of silence, nothing to come out of these boring moments. However, that's just what life is. Something will inevitably happen most of the time.
Well, I think this is one of the reasons I say, why does this happen? It's because no one today has I suppose I'd call it confidence, but just the realization of their own agency to think that, oh, nothing's happening. I could actually make something happen. No one ever thinks that. I never think that. And I wish we did think that.
Yeah, I was thinking, for examples with the elevators, which you mentioned, you go in and you say, no one's going to say hi to me. No one's going to ask me how my day is going. But then you have to be, in the Solacene, I think, will be equipped from a young age to be the person to ask that question, or a way to read the room of, oh, maybe no one wants to be asked any questions today, and be comfortable with silence.
Yeah, but I think that's largely what it is, because I don't think, I just think there'd be a little bit less silence in the Solacene. And I'm quite an antisocial person. And I hate small talk. You're pro-silence. I'm very pro-silence. But I also think that it's treat people how you want to be treated, right? No one wants to be spoken to today. No one ever wants to be spoken to. Even if they didn't have their phone on the bus, no one wants to engage in conversation. And I'm wondering why that is. Because in the Solacene, I think we will be a little bit more open to meeting people in these spontaneous circumstances, which, as you rightly pointed out, form the majority of life. It's not those liminal places, travel or walking down a hallway, elevators, meeting rooms. Your time in the meeting room is most likely going to be longer than your time in the appointment.
Yep.
So that's most of life.
Yeah, but we pretend like it just is time to be zoned out. What's disembodied? There's a word for that. Disembodied might be a fine word. But it's the same as we do it to ourselves. In the evenings, we go on Instagram and disengage with reality. I was thinking about buses and ways we could improve them in the Solacene, but I was thinking, okay, we take phones out of the equation. That's almost like a given.
Yeah.
Phones are out of the equation. No one has podcasts plugged into their ears. However, I was thinking about it, and okay, every single person's on their phone. It'd be interesting if there was a bubble floating above their head that said what they were doing, because that would tell you a little bit about each person. Yeah. Oh, that person's listening to Joe Rogan. Oh, that person is reading an audiobook.
I had
or
this later on when we're talking about how to encourage community conversation, basically, and as I say in the poem, sharing the room. Because what you described, everyone on their phone in the bus or with headphones in, or in some awful future with a VR headset on. Yeah. You're all in the bus, but you're all in your own room within the bus, and no one can see into each other's room. Yeah. Whereas previously, if someone was reading a book, knitting, or writing, I know what they're doing. So
it's a conversation starter.
Exactement.
You get to know your neighbors.
Exactement.
Even if you don't talk to them, that's the knitter. If there's one day in 5 years when I want to knit and I recognize this person on the bus, I can ask them a question. I feel like we're in a poetry reading. These are easy things, but it's also just, it's so easy when you say to people, oh, everyone's on their phone these days. And you always say, well, they used to all be reading the newspapers. Mockingly, you say.
But it's true though, because a lot of these things we've used to be common sense. I didn't want to be hearkening to the past too much. But we've lost them in the name of marketing and convenience, because, why would I want to carry a book, a notepad, a camera, knitting, a Nintendo DS? I can carry it all in one. It's like, well, here's one kind of practical reason.
Yeah.
Because then no one knows what you're doing. Continuing on with why I think this happens, there's this kind of ironic thing where even if what you were saying at the start, you're comfortable in your own skin, let's say you're quite outgoing, you have worked on your social skills, I think quite often people don't talk to the person beside them on the bus because we assume that they will not be outgoing, sociable, engaging. They'll either be very shy or non-responsive or just very, very small talky. So I think that a key thing is to assume the best of people. Yeah. Right now, I think we assume the worst. And I'm not sure if this comes from the news, possibly quite a lot of the news.
It comes from ourselves. It's like 9 times out of 10 when I'm on the bus, if someone talked to me, it would make me grumpy.
Yeah. So but why is that?
Why
That's
is
what
that?
I'm wondering.
Yeah. Because we're not used to it. I feel like it expends so much energy in a way that it shouldn't.
Because we're all introverted now.
Yeah. Like I just was out for a walk and I stumbled across a bazaar happening in the basement of a place. And so me and my friend went in, and there's a different energy when it was a bunch of old ladies, and one of them engaged us in a conversation that on the way out, it was almost like a light bulb was turned on in my head, and I was like seeing the people who I was passing. And so I was like, bonjour, like saying hello to people, which I never do. But it was because she had almost like lifted that veil of, oh no, everyone's grumpy, everyone's going with their business, because she engaged us in a conversation. I
have 2 notes on that, which is one is overexposure, because we live in Montreal now, and I've noticed myself that it's just weird. You do not say hello to people on the street. You don't wave to them or anything like that because there's so many people on the street.
It's true.
When we lived in rural areas, there was always a nod, smile, hello, or wave, because there were so few of you. So it's like now there's an overexposure, so you don't feel the need, or you don't want to, or it's just not the done thing. And also, old people. It's like they have a superpower compared to young people. Because I remember remarking once we were on a walk, and I don't think it was you, but there was another girl walking and an older man walking, and he said to her like, hey, how are you? And she was like, good. And he was like, would you mind showing me the time or something, or asking for directions or something like that? And she was like, yeah, sure. And I was like, young people no one would do that.
No one would ask the time or directions or ask a question.
Yeah, I mean, there's the obvious reason, which is because we always have the time and directions on us now, which is clearly not a great thing for socializing. But there's also just
you want to appear
the friendliness. Older people have more of an I don't care friendliness, I think. Whereas today we're more, I suppose, narcissistic.
Yeah, I feel like the cool thing is to be like, I don't need anyone. I'm cool. I'm busy. I'm important. I'm picturing, like, even 10 years ago, the people on their Blackberries on the bus. Yeah. So I feel like we're all now the people on our Blackberries. Like, oh, well, right now I'm just running my business. I don't have time to
It's really funny
socialize.
because the phone is that. The phone is always a symbol of, like, if you're in an elevator and 2 people are on their phone and you're just standing there, it's like, they have friends and I don't. Or on a bus. Yeah. So there's been countless occasions. I've done it. I'm sure a lot of other people have done it. When you just open your phone and just don't do anything. Yeah. But it's partly a compulsion, I think, like a legitimate tick, like an addict would have, where it's just like, oh, and you don't even, maybe you look at the home screen and then you put it back in your pocket and you don't even know the time. It's like, but that's the only information on the home screen half the time. So, but also it's at least a semi-conscious thing of, I want to look like I have a life.
Yeah, it's so unconscious almost that it just happens. I have talked about this before on the podcast, but there's a specific reason I got a watch, and it was so that I'd stop picking up my phone. And it's like, I feel annoying when I'm like constantly checking my watch because I don't care what time it is. But it's better to me than picking up my phone. And I hope that someday I can remove both of those habits. But it's just like a little thing to me that, because I don't think it's like, I never see someone checking their phone and think, oh my gosh, that's rude.
Why do you want to remove the picking up your phone?
Just because it feels like I'm addicted.
Do you think it takes away anything that you could be doing?
Yeah.
What?
I could be trying to build a picture of my place in the situation as a conversation starter, a facilitator, an artist, I suppose. Like, if you're in a space, as you said, you're in an ugly waiting room. And I feel like the person who's unartistic or who doesn't know that they want to be artistic yet would just disengage with the space. However, I find that if I can just be present and force myself to not break up my concentration every 45 seconds by checking my phone, it forces you almost to imagine a better space in order to become comfortable in that situation. And maybe over time, you keep going to that waiting room, you keep going to that elevator, you gain the confidence to enact those changes, to be the person to start the conversation, and so on.
Yeah, it's not a good thing, but I think I've always had this superpower where I'm an immense daydreamer and imaginer, to the point that I would always just do things or go places. Like if, for instance, my parents never did this, but if they had done the punishment of, go sit in the corner or whatever and think about what you've done, I wouldn't have minded it, even without a phone or paper or anything.
Yeah.
Because I would just think of some elaborate thing, this.
Yes.
Or I think it was partially born out of school where I was always so bored and I never had any friends. And it's continued into some of the various jobs that I've had where it's just, they've been very conducive to spending 9 hours daydreaming. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's inherently a bad thing. It's just a general trait that some people have. Mm-hmm. But I also think that, take the phone out of it, if you are doing that regularly, then when it comes time to really lock in and you're focus, be mindful, be present at, say, a convocation or a similarly important event, it's not always an easy switch that you can just flick on and say, well, now I'm not daydreaming, I'm doing this. Because your attention span your intention is conditioned to be a certain way. Zoning out, you're very attuned to that sort of thinking.
Yeah, like just because you're not on your phone doesn't mean you're engaged, doesn't mean you're being mindful or learning anything.
Yeah. But I don't think everyone always has to be switched on all the time.
I agree.
But you should be able to in convocation. Like, I question the guests or the graduates at the convocation if afterwards they even really notice that they're on their phone, you know what I mean?
Yeah, probably not.
Because that's just what it is to be somewhere.
Wow. This, I guess I hadn't been to a social event in 2 or 3 years.
Don't get me wrong, I think that's part of it as well. Because these people the students probably hadn't been to school in 2 or 3 years. Yeah. So we're not used to it. We're used to, let's say they're in a class, they're used to not really even having to pay attention to the teacher because they're in their bedroom. They can just go do whatever. So our attention span has definitely been splintered even further by the pandemic.
Yeah, I think so. Because I was thinking about how many times I went on my phone in live lectures, in the classroom, I would go on my phone. And I was like, that is so much worse when I was on online school because you could switch the tabs. You could spend 6 hours on one lecture. Yeah. And have spent 5 of those hours online shopping or 5 of those hours watching other YouTube videos or whatever. And I think that's relevant and important to try and draw attention to in your own life and in the Solacene. This will just hopefully not exist. And we're going to get to that later of how to make the world more conducive to being present.
Yeah, I had one final note on kind of the negatives, which is, well, I guess it's positive about being mindful in social situations that are potentially uncomfortable, which is just the raw kind of humanity of feeling things to their fullest, and things can only be felt in their fullest in the present. Let's say you're taking a video of your son graduating, which I think is completely fine. But afterwards, when you're looking at the video, you don't feel exactly what you felt in the moment, because in the moment it's stronger. You feel an echo of it, but it's not the exact same thing. It's just a looking back at it. An example I have is from a movie that we both like called Call Me By Your Name, that we've referenced a lot on Solacene before. At the end of the movie, one of the characters is basically heartbroken, and he has headphones in, is listening to music, but he kind of takes out the headphones to be heartbroken. And I always really like that, because I think it's the opposite. It's set in the 80s. I think that today it's like, we're going to put on the sad music. We're going to go into our own room, in other words. Yeah. But part of the key to feeling is that you're in the present room.
Yeah, and if you just keep reliving these shadows of the emotion, they'll like culminate in some kind of, I feel like, mental break. Like, I feel like that's almost a part of mental illness, is our inability to just feel things in the moment and be done feeling them almost.
Solacene therapy session.
I feel like that's what this is, low-key.
This week's episode is brought to you by
BetterHelp. Someday, maybe.
Who is it brought to us by?
Oh.
That's what I was trying to seg into.
Sorry, I just thought it was funny because I feel like most podcasts are sponsored by BetterHelp. So this is the simulacrace.
Simulacrace.
Do you know what that is, Aaron?
It's a plant. A money plant.
A fake plant.
Oh.
Haha. Because
Wait,
I thought,
fake plants have a Latin name?
yeah.
Because, what? I should have gotten that. I was so dumb.
Yeah. So basically,
the problem was I saw you had a $sign attached to it. For
yes.
those listening at home, I'll describe what she drew. It was a square black pot with I guess I see now that it was but the problem with your drawings is that
they all look the same.
They all look very cartoony and stylized. So I thought that was just your version of a houseplant. But it was a very straight brown trunk with 5 suspiciously symmetrical and round,
yes, exactly,
flat green leaves on it. It's
like generic plant. It doesn't even seem inspired.
But I thought the $sign was a hint.
No, the $sign is actually a price tag.
Yes.
So I chose this because I thought we were now allowed to do fake things. So I did fake plants. And the Latin name was kind of a tongue-in-cheek article posted by the Journal of Ethnobotany Research and Applications. And it was an article, it was a parody, and it was about a 6-year study to taxonomize fake plants. It was a joke, like no one spent 6 years doing that, but they assigned this Latin name to them. And fake plants are ancient, like they've been around as long as material has been around, basically, like fabric. So it began in ancient China with silks. When those were kind of discovered, people started making silk flowers, and there's a whole field of art devoted towards making these really realistic plants. However, today they're like mass-produced in factories. People stick them in their houses, and some of the benefits I saw of these plants are that they defy seasons, they take zero maintenance, they're a better use of money than real plants, and they really liven up a space, bring life into the space.
Okay.
And I feel like that just reminds me of social situations these days. It's like perhaps there used to be an art to existing quietly in the public. But today we all just have our phones and there's no art to it. And it's just mass-produced social interactions.
Well, I'm reminded a little bit of our Metaverse episode. We did kind of, not debunking, but opposing the proposed Metaverse, which would consume us all. And one of Zuckerberg's benefits that he said about it was that it's unprecedented or unparalleled human connection. And I just thought, no, it isn't. It's just a facsimile of it, which is exactly what this plant is.
Yeah, so I just think it was a funny choice for today because of the conversation. And it reminded, like I said, okay, they define seasons. It's like, or they defy seasons. And I feel like that's almost like what we feel like we've done with social situations. It's like we're defying socializing. We are doing way more socializing on our phone than we could in the real world.
Yeah.
We're doing so much more productivity than we could by just being quiet and taking in the quartet.
Yeah.
Anywho.
No, because TikTok, the internet, social media, whatever people are doing on their phones, the thing is that it is more entertaining than real life. It is more entertaining than the waiting room. And it is funnier. And most likely, the algorithm or you deliberately seeking out a community has resulted in it being full of people who are more likely to share your interests and to get along with you virtually than the people in the waiting room will.
There'll be no conflict.
Exactly.
Yes. There'll be no awkward situations. But I feel like you're just missing out on life. Like, you're missing out on killing a plant. So lame. You don't like killing a plant. But you learn something from killing a plant. You learn something from making a fool of yourself. It sucks. But we grow.
We will get into the positive half of the episode, the Solacene half, which is describing what these rooms should be like and how to create them.
Yeah.
The first note, I mean, we've run through a few of them already, but I just kind of did this in bullet points.
Mm-hmm.
One was that everyone's almost always sharing the same room in public, which means that, as you touched on, we will work to improve the spaces because there aren't just these easy escapes. You actually have to ask the bus driver to change the music or something. But I was thinking about gyms is a good example because music in the gyms typically is awful, but no one cares.
Yeah, because you just put on your own.
Right, but if we didn't all have headphones in, people would care, so the music would actually be better, or even live.
Very cool idea.
Also, we will be able to converse with the people we sit beside. There'll be a certain universal trust and therefore vulnerability, which we are currently lacking as we put up our social shields, our masks, if you will. Literally, figuratively. You want to keep going?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just like taking it in. I think, with the spaces, you're forced to be in them. So maybe you start to contribute to making it a little bit nicer. And I was thinking about that with like windows and spaces because they're dynamic, they're interesting. You could have two people just staring at the window. And it's like, I feel like it's better than two people staring at their phones because they're at least
staring at the
sharing
same thing.
An experience.
Yeah.
Like you were saying with radio, you really like, and even, everyone on the bus is reading the newspaper, but they are building community. They're all reading the same thing.
Right. Well, people talk about the fragmentation of culture like this. You can no longer talk to someone on the bus about music because there is no chance they listen to the same music as you. Or with the news. They're most likely either reading completely different news or they're getting a completely different spin on it. Movies, music, everything. But it's not just culture, as you said about the bus window. It's our realities. Like, it's the room around us. We're not even seeing the same thing out the window anymore.
You can't even make a joke like, this is an ugly couch.
Oh, is it?
No one's like looking at it. And I do think it's cool that we can all listen to our own music. We can all read our own books.
I think so, yeah.
But I think perhaps in these, because I say, okay, it takes up a lot of your life, but they are just short experiences. It's 1 minute in the elevator a day. For that 1 minute, you can just be present and be a part of something bigger than yourself.
Well, I think it would be great if our domains, our homes, were our homes. We could do whatever we want there.
Yeah.
But just the public thing, one of my points was that we shouldn't have the option of having everything in our pockets at one time, which we do right now in a little black rectangle.
Yeah. We are big proponents of the computer room.
The computer room and the computer pockets. So it's like sometimes... it's like in a video game where you have a limited inventory. You have to make choices before you go into each level. Do I want to bring my camera? Do I want to bring my book? Do I want to bring my selfie stick? I shouldn't bring that. I don't have the room. How about I just ask someone else to take a picture for me? Like, so many of our inventions are just to limit dependence on other people. Like, that's what the selfie stick is, right?
Yeah.
There is no benefit to it. Just have someone take the picture for you. But this eliminates that awkward interaction.
Yeah.
I took someone's picture for them yesterday. I really enjoyed it.
That's good. Happy for you, Aaron.
Because how often do we get to feel useful in any way, genuinely?
No, that's a good point. Every time anyone asks either of us for directions, we remark on it and say, I knew where that was, or I had no idea where that was.
And I feel so terrible après ça, after that.
Yeah. So then you maybe learn where it is. So next time, you can help someone. Yeah. We already touched on it a little bit, but like when in the Solacene, I think people will perhaps, you have an hour wait for a plane. So everyone's doing their own thing. They're reading a book, they're conversing, perhaps even listening to a podcast. I don't know. Listening to a podcast, maybe, but just something unique. And then you can maybe ask that person, because then you can identify they have an interest similar to me. I'm going to talk to them. And I think the thing is, people don't really want to be confronted and be like someone pulling an idea for a conversation in thin air. Sometimes that's just kind of annoying.
No, because right now, if everyone's on their phone, you are just starting from absolute scratch.
Yeah.
Or you're going to be nosy and say, hey, you're looking at memes, huh? Like, that's not the same. But if someone's reading Heart of Darkness in their lap, oh, I love that book.
Yeah.
They're not going to be, most likely they're not going to be happy. But there is because they're reading. They don't want to be interrupted. But sometimes they might be, oh, you read that book? All right. I don't know many readers.
Yeah.
Let's chat. Or what are you writing? I can only speak for myself, but if someone asked me once, what am I writing? I would actually be happy to share with them.
Usually you're not that engaged because you are in a public space. It's
No,
not like
I mean,
you're like
you're engaged, but
Yeah.
it's if we're talking about writing, then you're still engaged. Like that's something what you just said. It's the idea that you can only be engaged with something if you are doing it absolutely by yourself. Like if someone wants to talk to me about writing, then I'm still engaged in that activity, kind of.
That's true. Yeah, I just really like that idea because I always want to be creepy and like ask someone what they're listening to, but obviously
You can't do that, right?
Yeah, that's not right.
And I think that part of the I guess preponderance of phones in place of so many other objects has given rise to, say, the band T-shirt or just aesthetics in general. This is now the way that we signal who we are. It's not by what we do, it's just by what we look like. In terms of this narcissism again. Like let's say someone wants to show that they like reading, I don't know, what do people read? Comics. Instead of reading the comics now, because they'll probably just have it on their tablet or their phone, I'm going to wear a Marvel T-shirt. You know, there's a difference here, though, I think.
Yeah, but that's a bit more consumeristic. Yeah. Because it's like, well, I have to be my vibe instead of just like living, doing it. Yes. And I think that's an interesting comparison. I like that. My
final point on this, in terms of painting the picture of what things should be like, is a little bit intangible, and I don't want to cry on the podcast, but I was almost tearing up when I was writing a note about it earlier. But it's childlike shows of emotion or childlike expression, joy especially. We were also watching a couple stand-ups, particularly those little segments in Seinfeld. And I always love when they cut to the audience laughing, because I think there's such an unbridled joy. I'm sure at even comedy shows today, because it's a safe space to, like, you're supposed to laugh there. So today it's like everyone laughs there. But I think that if everywhere was like that, like if you were genuinely just laughing at things, I think a lot of people today would think you're a maniac.
It's true.
But I just think it's lovely. And I love watching children, you know, laugh at movies and playing and things like that. And it makes me really sad that we get that beaten out of us.
Do you know what I like?
What?
When people whistle.
Whistling?
Yeah, because I was at the garden a couple days ago, and I came around a corner. There's sprinkled through the garden, there's little sheds. And so one of the people that were working there, they were like in the shed whistling to themselves. And I was like, this is so lovely, because clearly they're not doing it for anyone else.
Same as dancing to yourself.
Exactly. It's like they're just doing it for themselves. And I always catch myself, like I hum quite a bit, especially when I'm at work, but I'll stop as soon as there's like a person there.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I wish we didn't have that self-awareness.
Yeah, it's like just, if you're...
Because a kid wouldn't.
Exactly.
The other note I had under this was that everyone's so darn kind of stoic and invulnerable and narcissistic today, and I hate that I sometimes find myself acting as if I'm on camera, even when I'm not on camera.
Oh, 100%.
Because that's exactly what it is. And it's not exactly just because people are so used to vlogging. Like, that's a really kind of reductive argument. But there's just this feeling that I always have to look and act a certain way.
Yeah, I 100%, when I walk down the street, I almost feel like I'm not looking through my eyes. I almost feel like I'm watching a camera behind me. Like I'm watching myself and thinking, is this looking weird? Is this...
Yeah.
No one cares. Or maybe people do slightly care.
They don't
but it's
care.
just like, we have this ingrained in us. And I feel like this can be changed through a lot of personal growth.
Right, but in the Solacene,
we
won't build up all these layers. So we'll just stay like that from kids.
Yes.
Which I think is really lovely. I'm sure there's all sorts of technical terms for the things that we're describing, the mental constructs and the complexes that we have. But there shouldn't really be, because when you put a name to something and make it sound really niche, it makes it sound like it's just indicative of this one condition that certain people have. But I'm telling you, I really think it's everybody our age, they just don't notice it, and younger. I'm thinking always of this girl in my middle school and high school who always used to dance around outside and like laugh at dandelions and stuff. And she wasn't insane. She was just very expressive.
Yeah.
She loved reading. When she was reading like classic books, she'd laugh out loud at it. And everyone was like, oh man, can you believe her? Like she was absolutely shunned. She was very, very unpopular. But now I just think she's one of the bravest people I've ever known, like genuinely in social situations, because it's not an easy thing to do. I wish I could be like that.
Yeah, me as well. So, unfortunately, I feel like we didn't
well, we can talk about how we're going to encourage that kind of spontaneity. Mm-hmm. And I had 5 points, I guess.
Okay.
The first one was the simplest: travel without the phone, because it forces that kind of community and
social learning, perhaps.
Yeah, just the presentness. Mm-hmm. The second one is to practice mindfulness, to keep yourself present. And there's ways to do this, right? It's like meditation or staring at something.
Journaling is really great.
Journaling, a mantra, all sorts.
Yeah, like I feel like you and I aren't exactly the gurus to instruct this. However, there are plenty of gurus. We try to embody what we preach.
I wouldn't say we're preaching it. We're just describing.
Embody what we express.
Well, I'm going to say we talk about what we strive to be.
Yes.
Also is to just genuinely recognize it in yourself. And as you say, either, the simple kind of concrete example is count how many times you're actually picking up your phone. It will surprise you. But also just ask yourself, if you're in an elevator, 2 other people walk in, what are you doing? Really try and picture it, because I can picture myself just putting out my phone and doing absolutely nothing on it. Mm-hmm. The fourth is, if we set the precedent from a young age, socialize us well. I don't think I'm a very social person. I mean, part of it's just your nature, but I'm always grateful to my mother, who dragged me along to these play dates with this boy who I absolutely despised. And I was so grumpy the whole time. And I mean, on the one hand, it probably fed into my resentment towards other people, especially my peers. But on the other hand, it got me conditioned to trying to eke out any scrap of positives from situations that I knew were going to last a long time and be negative. Yeah. In almost all ways.
No, that's a good point of like, I'm going to go to this place. It's going to be horrible. But like, just try and practice finding one good thing about it, even if it's like, their shirt is really nice. I like their shirt. And they're telling you about something you really disagree with. Or maybe trying to come up with, perhaps if I encounter this person, I can talk to them and try and express my point of view. Or like trying to find, positive in sucky situations of like, I've lately been picturing myself. There's one person on our floor who I see very often, but I've never talked to. Ooh. But because I've seen them so many times, I think I have something I can say to them, basically.
Got to be brave and share the room.
And so one day I need to share the room and just say,
maybe they listen to the podcast.
Maybe they do listen to the podcast.
If so, come and talk to Alicia.
Come and find us.
We should put up a poster on their door.
Yeah. Maybe not.
Not a bad idea. And the fifth, and I thought most kind of concrete example, literally, is making spaces for common interests, which, I mean, to go back to the past, used to just be common sense, but now have been eradicated because we all have this shared digital space, which is not real space. Twitter isn't a real place. And I had the example, again, of my high school, which replaced its library by removing all the books and putting computers in their place.
I would love to see it.
And obviously the thinking was, well, if students want to read their books, they will bring them in, or they'll buy them, or they'll read them online, or something like that, which, I mean, whatever. But what it also does is it stops there being a room where all the library-going kids would go, because not to generalize, kids who go to the library in high school at lunch are pretty likely to get along with the other kids who go to the library in high school at lunch. What I found myself doing was going to this place, but the other ones were all scattered, because suddenly there wasn't a nucleus where everyone could hang out in. And people don't really think about that today, I think, when they're building spaces or converting them willy-nilly.
Because it's almost like we don't want to segregate people. We don't want the book nerds to...
Right. But we do. The book nerds want that.
Yes.
Because in my middle school, there was a library. There was that.
Yeah.
There were lunches where I never spoke to these people. They never spoke to me, but we'd just be sitting around a table all reading. And it was quite pleasant.
Like, I don't think... It's almost like we've vilified community. We don't want people to be exclusive. So we just want there to be no places to exclude people from, perhaps.
I think this is one thing that, the internet can help with, because these convening spaces, these groups, can be organized digitally, maybe even better than they can be done in the physical world, just through posters or whatever, but with the aim of interacting in the real world.
In person, yeah.
You know, I had that idea, it was mostly fantastical, that I shared with you a few weeks ago, of in the future, why don't we just all pick cities and move there based on interests and politics? Like, it was mostly a joke, but things like that. So I thought, well, if people want their politics to be a certain way, why don't we all band together, move to this one place, and, you know, vote in a utopian government, essentially.
Yeah, this is a very...
It's a low-level version of that.
Yeah, I think so. Because I was thinking today, like, I met up with a friend who I met online, and I was like, I feel like so many weeks on the podcast we're bashing the internet, but I really think it has a place. But it needs to, have the goal of manifesting itself physically. It could be not in relationships, but it could be in your lifestyle. I just think we need to remember that that isn't the be-all, end-all. Having a digital friend, having a digital aesthetic really well curated. I think it really needs to become. Very well said. Very articulate, I think. And I found that episode, those 47 or so minutes, 45 minutes, very cathartic. Me as well.
It was a little bit stream of consciousness. I hope the reader wasn't bored, and I hope that we didn't sound like boomers. But thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye.